Well, hello there, boxing fans. Thank you for joining me here on Talking Fight for another episode of Boxing News Today. And today we're going to start off with David Benavidez. Uh, as you know, we've got a couple of fights upcoming that we'll talk about on the Friday night panel later on at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Tommy Fury versus KSI is happening. Tim Sayu and Brian Mendoza. Janabek Alam Canuli versus Vincenzo Galtieri. Miguel Berchtold and Diego Reyes, Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz next weekend, Jack Catterall and Jorge Linares, Alexis Roca, Giovanni Santellan, not to mention Jonathan Gonzalez and Gerardo Zapata, and Amanda Serrano and Daniela Ramos rounding out October. A lot of fights upcoming. But with respect to David Benavidez, who's going to be entering the ring in November, Dan Ambrose of BoxingNews24.com writes, David Benavidez wants undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez stripped of his WBC belt if he refuses to fight him next. If he refuses to fight him next, if he's victorious against Demetrius Andrade on November 25th. Well, given how fond the WBC president Mauricio Solomon is of Canelo, he probably won't strip him in order or order him to defend his mandatory against Benavidez. Benavidez 27-0, by the way. Canelo's way too popular as a fighter. It brings in a ton of money. He's not going to get stripped. Anyway, as we all know, Andrade, he's 32-0, 19 knockouts. That should be a great fight, being held down at the Michelob Ultra Arena at the Mandalay Bay Resort in Las Vegas, as I said, November 25th. But all the news regarding Canelo doesn't stop there. Shortly after his recent victory, he said, let's have a look here. He has a nice one to have, and this is a problem. Currently facing super middleweight contender Dave Benavidez, who has emerged as a potential Alvarez opponent, but he must get past Demetrius Andrade first, as we all know, as we all just discussed. And far from a routine fight, Benavidez knows that dangerous Andrade is like to present and is therefore more determined than usual to push all the talk of Canelo to the back of his mind. Andrade, after all, is unbeaten in his own right, and although coming up from middleweight, he's long been viewed as a fighter whose danger has led to many looking the other way when offered the chance to fight him. It is perhaps for this reason the Southpaw's career has to date been a low-key variety, and that's why no one, at the age of 35, he's getting his shot at the big stage. All right. So Dave Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade is going to be a big fight, and of course, the winner obviously looking to challenge Canelo. But that's not the only person who's going to be challenging Canelo, it seems. Down at the WBO Congress, the 36th annual, I believe, down in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, it's taking place right now. It looks like former WBO junior middleweight champ Jaime Munguia. He's 42-0, by the way, 33 knockouts, but has not fought for a world title since vacating the 154-pound title back in 2019, but nonetheless remained a viable contender in both the middleweight and later super middleweight divisions the last 4 years. Appears to have emerged as the betting favorite to win out in the upcoming Canelo sweepstakes. So, ironically, there has been some criticism levied on Munguia for the perception that he was not capitalizing on any opportunities to utilize his number one ranking and position himself in a world title fight. In fact, it appeared that WBO president Francisco Paco Valcarcel was about to put Eric Gomez of Golden Boy Promotions on the spot about Munguia previously declining to take advantage of his position as a mandatory challenger to the champion. Well, coming out of the conference, it says, now we have Munguia at number one. Valcarcel noted, we offer Munguia a lot of opportunities to fight as mandatory at 154 and 160. I know Eric Gomez from Golden Boy is here, but Munguia is the number one. When he was interrupted by Gomez to let the WBO president know exactly what was on everyone's mind, said Gomez, yes, we'll take the mandatory against Canelo. Although exercising his mandatory spot moves the needle of a Canelo-Munguia fight closer to coming to fruition, there's still no guarantee it'll happen quickly. Valcarcel added, Canelo just fought Charlo, so he has 18 more months to make another mandatory, but any negotiations are welcome. Valcarel added some personal commentary to a possible all-Mexico battle between two of the most exciting fighters in boxing. He said, "I'd like to see your guy against Canelo." Valcarcel added, "It should be one of the best fights we can have. Both men can fight." And Gomez then added, "Well, there have been some initial talks." So let's leave it at that for the time being and move along to see, oh yes, Tim Sayu, who's, as I said earlier, opening his show. He's going to be facing Brian Mendoza, and the winner could face Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, or Canelo Alvarez. Go figure. So it's a potential big money career defining field that could be on the cards for Sim Sayu if the recently elevated WBO junior middleweight champ is able to overcome Brian Mendoza this weekend on the Gold Coast down under in Australia. And I've talked about both fighters in my previous news episodes. Go and check them out. But Sayu, he's 23-0, 17 knockouts, will return to the scene of his demolition of Carlos Acampa, where he showcased power, precision, and efficiency before flooring the Mexican after just 77 seconds. The dominant performance was expected finally to land Sayu a highly anticipated fight against Jermell Charlo for the Americans' quartet of belts at 154. Sayu and Charlo had initially been slated to fight back in January, but those plans were scuppered when Charlo suffered a broken left hand during training camp. And by mid-year, the WBO had mandated Charlo to fight Sayu before September. But the bout again failed to eventuate, with Charlo instead opting to fight Canelo Alvarez at super middleweight, a fight he would ultimately get pummeled in. So let's see what happens to Tim Sayu and Brian Mendoza when they go toe-to-toe in the upcoming few days. Now let's get back to something that's been on top of most boxing headline reports, and that is the Olympics that are coming up in Paris in 2024. And one of the countries that I thought always had women boxers compete at the Olympics, that country being Cuba, did not. They've only had men fight in the Olympics. So now it looks like Cuba will allow their male counterparts to take part in the Paris Olympics. Let's have a quick read here. Over the last decade, Cuban authorities' decision to prevent female boxers from competing became more incongruous, not only because the Cuban state promotes itself as a vanguard of women's rights and equality, but because the National Sports Institute has long allowed women to compete at the Olympics in a range of other contact sports such as wrestling, taekwondo, and judo. Almost all the countries affiliated with the IBA practice women's boxing, but not Cuba. The president of Cuba's Boxing Federation, Alberto Puig del Vaca, told Al Jazeera that the ban on women's boxing was rooted in safety concerns. There were worries about whether feminine boxing could damage women's bodies, above all when they are pregnant, he said, adding that the authorities carried out investigations lasting years to ensure athlete safety would be protected. Female boxers must take periodical pregnancy tests. Now the ban is lifted, and women must wear padding for protection. But for many, the underlying reason for the foot dragging was entrenched machismo culture and paternalistic culture of overprotecting women. In 2009, for example, the year the International Olympic Committee approved women's boxing, the head coach of Cuba's men's team, Pedro Roque, told journalists that Cuban women, are there to show their beautiful faces, not to take punches. Let's move on to Joshua Buatsi. Okay, Buatsi and Aziz, they're set to clash in the eliminator for the WBA title. This is coming from South London. And they're actually quite decent rivals on the British boxing scene. They're going to square off at the O2 Arena in a couple of weeks. It'll be a thrilling contest without a doubt, and serve as the last eliminator for the WBA champ, Dmitry Bivol, and his title. So despite beginning their careers at the same amateur boxing club in South London, both fighters are scheduled to face off next month due to two very different courses they have taken. Said promoter Ben Shalom of the Boxer, BOXXER, both fighters have agreed to fight each other. It's flattering when other promoters are talking about your fighters, but Dan Aziz is with Boxer. He's one of our proudest achievements. Dan Aziz, by the way, he's 20-0, 13 knockouts, won the European title by defeating Thomas Froy through technical knockout in the 12th round back in Paris in March. And Joshua Buatsi, he's 17-0, 13 knockouts as well. Made his ring comeback in May after a year away, cruising to a unanimous decision victory over Pavel Stepien to restart his quest for a world title shot. Speaking of shots, let's move over to a big fight coming up in America. As written by MJ Mendoza on BoxingNews24.com in the heartland of Inglewood, California. On October 21st, a thrilling night of boxing awaits fans as two undefeated prospects step into the ring for a high-stakes showdown. Joe Sean Showtime James, 7-0, hailing from Sacramento, and David Dynamite Stevens, 13-0. From Reading, Pennsylvania, are set to face off in an intense 8-round super middleweight bout at the KIA Forum. And that's not Killed in Action, that's Kia the car. All right, let's move on. Also on that particular bill, we're going to see quite an evening of fierce competitions as a promoter. James versus Stevens is just one of the most exciting contests that will unfold. The night's DAZN broadcast features a total of 5 highly contested matches, promising boxing fans an evening filled with fierce competition and entertainment. The 12-round main event of the evening features Alexis Roca versus Giovanni Santillan as they battle for the WBO NABO welterweight title. It's a promising high-stakes showdown. As I said, the co-main event features world champion Jojo Diaz, said that last week, and he's going to be fighting Richard Medina, 15-1, by the way, hailing from San Antonio, Texas. And by the way, the championship fight of the night will see IBF flyweight title holder Areli Mutsino, 32-3-2, by the way, 11 knockouts defender, hard-won title against Gabriela Fandora, 11-0, fighting out of Coachella Valley. A 4-time flyweight titleist will be making her first title defense following a grueling battle with Lonella Udisa back in October 2022 when she secured the Argentinian's belt. On the other side, Gabrielle Fandora, in her quest for a world championship belt, last emerged victorious in a fight against Maria Santizo that went the distance. So good stuff happening down in California. It's interesting to see that Bakhtir Jalolov is returned to action November 17th in Uzbekistan, and his opponent will be the South African fighter Chris Thompson. However, pundits are saying this will be a pretty easy victory for Jalolov. He's 13-0, undefeated, 13 knockouts, whereas Chris Thompson, he's 12-5-1. Looks like it's going to be, I hate to say it, but an easy outing for Jalolov. Anyway, in 2023, Jalolov has only had one professional bout, which took place in Tulsa. It marked his debut under the promotional banner of Top Rank, where he secured a victory against Nigerian boxer Onariode Iran-Wahemi in the first round. So that's going to be a good battle for sure. Let's move over to Vergil Ortiz Jr. We haven't seen his name in a while. He's been out of action for a while, but he's planning to re-enter the ring on January 6th in a super welterweight debut. Vergil Ortiz Jr. has fought just once in the last 2 years while withdrawing from multiple fights with health issues. Some of the more notes from the ongoing WBO Congress down in, as I said, Dominican Republic. Let's see. Salvador Rodriguez, Live Luna, and others are doing an admirable job of documenting. Golden Boy's Eric Gomez, as I mentioned earlier, claims that snake-bit prospect Vergil Ortiz Jr. will make his 154th debut on January 6th with Marlon Esparza, tentatively planned to unify against Areli Mutsino in the co-feature. Mutsino, wow, was mentioning these names and fights coming up, and here they are being mentioned for January fights. Mutsino fights Gabriel Fandora a week from Saturday, so I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work out. Ortiz is 19-0, 19 knockouts, has fought just once last 2 years in August 2022, stoppage of Michael McKinson. But he's been racked with health issues for ages, including multiple cases of COVID and rhabdomyolysis. But things came to a head in July when he fainted during fight week and once again nixed a planned bout with Imantas Stanionis. While the new weight class should be much easier on his body, it's questionable whether Ortiz should be fighting even at all. If he does manage to put everything back together, questions linger as to whether his punishing style will remain effective against naturally larger men. He's got a whole lot to answer, is what I'm saying. That's what the author says. We'll see which opponent Golden Boy chooses to answer those questions, judged by the recent matchmaking. Probably someone more Philomena Kunk than David Frost. And of course, being written by Patrick Sternberg out of badlefthook.com. Alrighty. New IBF rankings are out, and Otto Wallin passes Anthony Joshua. Let's just leave it there. Otto Wallin, 26-1, 14 knockouts. Looks like he'll be challenging Filip Hrgova for the IBF heavyweight title coming up soon. We've talked about that quite often. Anyway, in other heavyweight news, we saw that 31-year-old heavyweight Kem Ljungquist, he's 16-0-0, undefeated, 10 knockouts, claimed the IBF international title in May of this year at a home gala in Nystad, where he stopped the Macedonian Sefer Safari, 25-4-1, by the way, 23 knockouts in the third round. In his first title defense, squaring off against 32-year-old South African fighter, the Hurricane Johnny Muller, 23-11-2, 14 knockouts. It was a one-sided affair. Ljungquist quickly dominated the action and gradually dismantled his opponent. And in the 10th, he dropped Muller with a body shot, notching his 16th consecutive victory. And finally, let's have a quick read about the WBA, who have upheld the Usyk victory decision regarding that controversial below-the-belt shot. In a nutshell, they say the WBA rules determine that the decision of a low blow and whether a boxer can receive it can continue and are strict competencies of the referee, and he's the only one authorized to make those decisions. And after studying all the documents, the conclusions of all the instances and internal rules of the WBA, it was determined that the appeal does not proceed, and the decision of the fight stands with the victory and defense of the champion Oleksandr Usyk. All right, fight fans, thanks for joining me once again. Appreciate it very much. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll see you later on at 4 p.m. Eastern Time when I join Mike Orr on his show Knuckle Up. And then the Friday night panel, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, with Tim Witherspoon, Lou Eisen, Mike Orr, and possibly some other guests as well. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll talk to you later.